I am 80 years old and I stopped chasing people who had already learned how to live without me. For a long time, I refused to accept that some relationships had changed. I kept calling, I kept sending messages, I kept inviting people who always seemed too busy. I remembered birthdays, asked about their problems, and checked whether they were well. When they forgot me, I made excuses for them. They have work, they have children, they are tired, they are going through something. Sometimes those excuses were true, but excuses did not change the quiet truth. I was carrying relationships that would have disappeared the moment I stopped making the effort. That truth hurt more than loneliness. Loneliness is painful, but chasing people who do not choose you adds humiliation to the pain. I know how it feels to look at a telephone that does not ring. I know what it is like to wonder whether someone would notice if you stopped calling first. I know the shame of sending another message after the first one was ignored, then pretending it did not matter. It mattered. It always mattered, but at 80, I no longer believe I must chase people to prove that I am worth remembering. Old age teaches you quietly. It does not always teach through words. Sometimes it teaches through absence. It shows you the empty chair at a family gathering. It shows you the message that was read but never answered. It shows you who remembers you only when they need advice, money, help, or comfort. It also shows you who calls for no reason except to hear your voice. When you are younger, you may not notice these differences. Life is busy. There are people everywhere. Work, family, responsibilities, and social gatherings fill the calendar. Then the years pass, the workplace disappears, the children build lives of their own, friends move away, become ill, or leave this world. The circle becomes smaller, and each absence becomes easier to see. That is when many older people begin chasing, not because we are weak, because we are afraid. We fear becoming invisible. We fear that if we stop making the effort, no one will come toward us. And sometimes that is exactly what happens. But the hardest lesson came later. I learned that losing a one-sided relationship is not the same as losing love. Sometimes you are only losing the work you were doing to keep an illusion alive. The first lesson I learned was that repeated silence is also an answer. I used to believe silence meant I should try harder. If someone did not answer, I waited and called again. If they cancelled a visit, I offered another day. If they forgot an important occasion, I told myself not to be sensitive. I wanted to appear understanding, but understanding should not require you to deny what is happening. There was someone I had known for many years. We once spoke often. As time passed, the calls became less frequent. At first, I did not worry. Relationships change with age and responsibility, but eventually every conversation began with my effort. I called, I asked questions, I kept the conversation moving. I suggested meeting. They always sounded pleased to hear from me, but they never reached out afterwards. One day I decided not to call. I did not make an announcement. I did not become angry. I simply waited to see whether the relationship could stand without me holding it up. Weeks passed, then months. The silence told me what I had been afraid to hear. I had not been forgotten by accident. I had simply become unimportant in the rhythm of that person's life. That was painful. But it was also clear, this is where many of us make the mistake. We treat repeated silence as confusion when it is often a pattern. One missed call means little. One busy week means nothing. People struggle. People become overwhelmed. Good relationships can go through quiet periods. But when someone repeatedly ignores you, cancels, forgets, and never returns the effort, do not keep translating their silence into hope. Pay attention to the pattern without turning it into hatred. Their silence may not mean you are worthless. It may only mean they are no longer willing or able to give the relationship what you give it. You cannot force balance by giving more. If you remember nothing else, remember this: an unanswered effort should not become an endless pursuit. The second lesson was that being needed is not the same as being remembered. This took me years to understand. Some people did not call to ask how I was. They called when they needed something. They needed advice. They needed a favor. They needed someone to listen while they complained. They needed money, transportation, a place to stay, or help with a problem they did not want to solve alone. Because I was older and had spent much of my life helping others, I responded quickly. Being needed made me feel useful. After retirement, usefulness can feel like proof that you still matter. The world no longer asks for your work. Children no longer depend on you in the same way. Your days become quieter. Then someone calls and says, "I need you." Those words can warm an older heart. But usefulness can create a dangerous kind of closeness. I began noticing that certain people disappeared as soon as their problem was solved. They did not call afterwards to ask how I was doing. They did not remember the advice I had needed. They remembered my usefulness, not my heart. For a long time I accepted this because some contact seemed better than none. But company purchased with labor is not genuine connection. I began responding differently. Instead of immediately solving every problem, I listened and asked, "What do you think you should do?" Instead of offering money, I gave myself time to think. Instead of changing my day, I asked whether the request could wait. Some people adjusted. Others stopped calling. Their disappearance answered a painful question. They had not forgotten me when they needed something. They had forgotten me when I had nothing to provide. Do not confuse being useful with being loved. Love remains interested in who you are when your hands are empty. The third lesson was painful because it involved family. Family can forget you in ways strangers never could because family knows exactly how much your love has already given. When children are young, you remember everything. You remember their appointments, worries, favorite meals, school events, and the names of their friends. You notice when their voice changes. You know when something is wrong before they say it. Then they grow older. Their lives expand while yours may become smaller. They have homes, careers, partners, children, bills, and private burdens. The days move quickly. You may think of them every morning while they may pass several days without thinking to call. That difference can break the heart if you measure love only by attention. I used to call my family often because I wanted to remain connected. There is nothing wrong with that. But over time, some calls began to feel like requests for proof. I listened carefully for warmth. I measured how quickly they ended the conversation. I noticed whether they asked about me or simply answered my questions. I turned every call into a silent examination of how much I mattered. That made me bitter. They did not know they were being tested. I did not tell them clearly that I felt lonely. I wanted them to notice without being told. When they did not, I felt forgotten. Some people love you, but they do not know how to protect your heart. I learned to be honest without begging. I could say, I would enjoy hearing from you more often. I could suggest a day to visit. I could express love without sending guilt with it. Then I had to release the outcome. Adult children should care for their aging parents. Love should include effort. But a parent cannot force closeness by reminding a child of every sacrifice. Sacrifice used as a weapon becomes a debt no child can ever finish paying. I stopped saying, after everything I did for you. Those words may be true, but they rarely create the kind of love the heart wants. I also stopped making endless invitations. I invited once. I made room. If they came, I welcomed them warmly. If they did not, I continued with my life. A parent's dignity should not depend on how often an adult child walks through the door. Family may be part of your life, but they cannot be the entire foundation beneath it. The fourth lesson was that chasing people often comes from fear of what their absence says about us. I did not chase only because I missed people. I chased because their distance made me question myself. Was I difficult? Had I become boring? Had age made me less valuable? Had I failed as a friend, parent, or relative? Every unanswered call became evidence in a private trial against myself. I searched old conversations for mistakes. I remembered times I had been impatient. I wondered whether I should apologize even when I did not know what I had done. That kind of thinking is exhausting. It gives other people's attention too much authority over your identity. I did not understand this until I was much older. Someone's absence is information about the relationship, not a complete judgment of your worth. People pull away for many reasons. Sometimes they are selfish, sometimes they are overwhelmed. Sometimes your lives have simply moved in different directions. Sometimes you have made mistakes, sometimes they have, and sometimes no single person is to blame. Not every relationship is meant to last forever in the same form. A friendship can be real and still end. A family bond can remain even when closeness fades. A person can value what you once shared and still no longer make room for you now. You do not have to turn every ending into proof that you were unlovable. When I stopped chasing, I had to sit with the fear that no one might return. That silence was uncomfortable, but slowly I heard something beneath it, my own voice. I began remembering who I was before I made other people's attention the measure of my value. I was still thoughtful, still capable of love, still worthy of respect, still alive. You do not disappear because someone stops looking in your direction. The fifth lesson was that loneliness can make you run back to people who hurt you. Loneliness edits memory. It removes the cruel words and leaves the laughter. It hides the tension and shows you the good days. It makes you remember how someone once made you feel while forgetting how you felt. After your most recent conversations, there were people I missed deeply after stepping away from them. I missed familiar voices. I missed old jokes. I missed the comfort of history. On lonely evenings, I considered calling, not because anything had changed, but because the quiet felt heavy. Before reaching for the telephone, I learned to remember the whole relationship. I remembered the disrespect. I remembered how often I had been ignored until they needed something. I remembered the nights I could not sleep after our arguments. I remembered the relief I felt when plans with them were cancelled. Missing someone does not always mean they belong close to you. Sometimes you miss what the relationship once was. Sometimes you miss what you hoped it would become. Sometimes you miss having someone, not that particular person. A quiet life is not an empty life, but you must learn how to live inside the quiet without allowing loneliness to negotiate away your dignity. I began giving loneliness a different answer. I went outside, I spoke to a neighbor, I called someone who had shown steady care, I visited familiar places, I allowed small conversations to matter. I stopped believing that connection was valuable only when it came from the people who had forgotten me. There are people we overlook because we are too busy staring at a closed door. A new friendship may not carry decades of history, but it can still carry kindness. A short conversation may not cure loneliness, but it can remind you that you still belong to the world. Do not reopen a harmful door just because no one has knocked on the healthy one yet. The sixth lesson was that dignity sometimes requires letting people misunderstand your silence. When I stopped chasing, some people said I had changed. They were right. I had changed from someone who carried every relationship to someone who noticed whether the other person carried anything at all. A few called me distant. Some assumed I was angry. Others believed I no longer cared. The old version of me would have explained everything. I would have said, "I stopped calling because you never called me." I would have listed missed visits, unanswered messages, and forgotten promises. I wanted them to understand that my distance had a reason. But the older I get, the less I explain myself to people who only hear what they want. Someone who truly values the relationship may ask gently, "Have I done something? You seem quieter." That question opens a door for honesty. Someone who only enjoyed your constant effort may become offended without ever examining their own absence. I stopped giving long explanations to people who had years of evidence. Sometimes dignity means walking away without proving your pain. You do not need a final speech for every fading relationship. You do not need to send a message announcing that you will no longer make the effort. You can simply stop carrying what should have been shared. Silence should not be used as punishment. I do not believe in disappearing to make someone anxious or withdrawing love to gain control. But there is a peaceful silence that comes after you have done enough. It says, "I will no longer force what does not come freely." That silence is not cruelty. It is acceptance. The seventh lesson was that when you stop chasing, you finally see who comes toward you. I feared that no one would. Some people did disappear. That hurt, but others surprised me. One person began calling more often after noticing that I had grown quiet. Another asked whether I was doing well. A neighbor started stopping by for short conversations. An old friend sent a message without needing anything. These gestures felt different because I had not pulled them out of anyone. They were freely given. I began noticing the quality of effort rather than demanding constant attention. Not everyone can visit often. Not everyone enjoys long telephone calls. Some people show care quietly. They remember a small detail. They check whether you arrived home safely. They bring something from the shop. They listen without looking at the clock. I had spent too much time chasing unavailable people and not enough time appreciating the steady ones. Peace came when I stopped demanding that love arrive in only one form. Still, effort matters. A healthy relationship cannot survive forever on memories alone. Both people must move towards each other somehow, not equally every day, but honestly over time. There will be periods when one person carries more. Illness, grief, work, or family trouble may limit someone's ability to show up. Love makes room for those seasons, but a season is different from a permanent pattern. Pay attention to who returns when the storm has passed. Pay attention to who notices when you stop speaking. Pay attention to who remembers you when they need nothing. Those people deserve your energy. The final lesson was that stopping the chase does not mean closing your heart. For a while, I became too guarded. After feeling forgotten, I told myself I needed no one. I stopped reaching out, even when I genuinely wanted connection. I treated every delay as rejection. I confused self-respect with emotional distance. That was not peace. That was hurt, wearing the clothes of independence. Human beings need one another. At 80, I still need conversation. I still enjoy company. I still want to know that someone remembers me. There is no shame in that. Age does not remove the need to be loved. Wisdom is not pretending you need nothing. Wisdom is knowing how to reach out without abandoning your dignity. Now, when I miss someone, I may call. But I call because I want to share something, not because I need them to prove my worth. I may invite someone to visit, but I invite once, clearly and warmly. I do not keep asking until the invitation becomes begging. I may tell a family member, I miss you, but I do not use my sadness to control them. There is a difference between honest connection and chasing. Honest connection says, I value you. Chasing says, please choose me so I can believe I have value. One is love. The other is fear. At 80, I stopped chasing people who forgot me, but I did not stop loving them. I simply stopped standing outside closed doors. I stopped repeating my name to people who had already shown me where I stood. I stopped keeping my days empty for uncertain promises. I stopped offering endless help in exchange for temporary attention. I stopped measuring my life by who called. That created space. Space for the people who made sincere effort. Space for quieter friendships. Space for my own routines. Space for rest. Space for the person I had neglected while trying to remain important to everyone else. Myself. For years I prepared the good things for visitors. I saved certain food, kept special cups unused, and waited for company before making the house feel alive. Now I understand that I live here too. I use the good cup. I prepare a proper meal. I sit in the comfortable chair. I open the curtains even when no guest is expected. I no longer treat my life like a waiting room. The people who remember me are welcome. The people who forgot me are not hated. I wish them well, but I do not follow them carrying reminders of my existence. Peace becomes more valuable when your energy becomes limited. Every call you make to someone who repeatedly ignores you costs something. Every invitation offered to an unwilling person takes something from your dignity. Every hour spent wondering why you were forgotten is an hour taken from the life still in front of you. Do not waste all your tenderness on people who have no place to hold it. Give some of it to yourself. Give some to the person who listens. Give some to the neighbor who notices. Give some to the friend who responds slowly but sincerely. Give some to the new connection you have not yet allowed to grow. And keep enough for the quiet days. There will still be moments when you miss those who forgot you. Healing does not erase history. A song may remind you of them. A birthday may bring back old memories. You may still wonder why the relationship changed. Let the sadness come without letting it pull you back into pursuit. You can miss someone and remain still. You can love someone and stop chasing. You can forgive someone and accept that they no longer belong close to you. Not every person who leaves must be followed. Some departures are instructions. They teach you where your effort is no longer needed. They teach you what one-sided love feels like. They teach you to recognize people who meet you halfway. At 80, I no longer ask, how can I make them remember me? When I ask, how can I live well even if they do not? That question gave me back my life. I cannot control who calls. I cannot force someone to visit. I cannot make another person value history the way I do. But I can decide how long I wait. I can decide where I place my hope. I can decide whether another person's absence becomes the center of my day. I can decide that my life remains meaningful even in a quiet house. Old age teaches you quietly. It teaches you that love should be offered, not begged for. It teaches you that attention forced by guilt does not satisfy the heart. It teaches you that some relationships end long before we stop chasing them. And it teaches you that peace sometimes begins when your feet finally stop running after people who never turn around. I am 80 years old. I have lost people to distance, death, disappointment, and time. Some losses were unavoidable. Others became peaceful only when I stopped fighting them. I no longer chase people who forgot me. I remember myself instead. I remember that my time has value. I remember that my heart deserves care. I remember that one sincere relationship is worth more than 10 maintained through fear. And I remember that being forgotten by someone does not mean I have become forgettable. If you have ever stopped chasing people who stopped making an effort, share your age in the comments. Tell me what happened when you finally became still. Did they return? Did the relationship end? Or did you discover a deeper peace without them?